for the November edition of the VLab Forum. I'm joined here in beautiful downtown Silver Spring in the shadow of the giant acorn by John Chattel, who is our logistical support and production manager here at the VLab Forum. This afternoon, we are fortunate to have Tabitha Huntemann of the Meteorological Development Lab provide us a presentation entitled Aviation Forecast Verification Tool, a near real-time verification system to support digital aviation services. To remind everyone, our format here for the VLab Forum is about 30 minutes or so of content presented by Tabitha, followed by roughly 30 minutes of question and answer. We ask you to hold your questions until the 30-minute, till Tabitha's finished, and then please use the raise your hand feature or the chat feature to answer a question. If you raise your hand, we will unmute you, and you can ask your question directly to Tabitha. If you use the chat, John Chattel will read your question to Tabitha on your behalf. Also a reminder that this session of the VLab Forum, like all, are recorded, and the recording will be uploaded to the VLab Forum website shortly after the conclusion of the session. As always, the intent of these is to present new things that may or may not eventually be implemented in weather service operations. The focus is on research to operations and where things are at, so we get a heads up, an idea what's coming down the pipe. Hopefully you'll get that from today's presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tabitha.
Thanks for that introduction, Steve. So like Steve said, I'm here to present on the Aviation Forecast Verification Tool, which has the very catchy acronym of AFVT. This is a tool that's being developed by MDL, and I'd just like to recognize the other developers on this team, Dana Strom and Steve Lanciani, who've done a lot of good work in supporting this tool. So, all right, Linda, there we go. So why are we making this Aviation Forecast Verification Tool? Well, mainly we want to support digital aviation services. And you may think to yourself, don't we already have verification tools that support this need? Well, not quite. You're probably familiar with Stats on Demand, which provides verification of alphanumeric products, tasks, watches, and warnings. But a limitation with Stats on Demand is that it doesn't contain gridded verification. So in this Digital Aviation Services framework, we would want to verify grids from the NDFD, and Stats on Demand does not fulfill that need. We have Voice Verify, which does verify gridded forecasts, but its limitation is that it's locally maintained. We want to be able to view, national statistics or regional statistics and not just at a WFO. Here at MDL, we also support this NDFD verification, which does also verify gridded forecasts. But this is not an operational system, nor is it real time. It's something that we update on a monthly basis. So we really identified this need to have a tool that can do verification of these new digital aviation services type grids. So this Aviation Forecast Verification Tool, what does it do? It stores forecasts and observations, so it's storing forecast grids from NDFD and gridded guidance, and it also stores gridded analysis to do the gridded verification and station observations to do point-based verification. From these forecasts and observations, we compute verification metrics, and then we can depict those verification results on a web-based GUI. I'd like to recognize that this work is funded jointly by the Office of Science and Technology Integration, as well as the Aviation and Space Weather Services branch. So, how does AFVT benefit digital aviation services? Well, one thing that the Weather Service does is we provide quality management system data to the FAA. This new capability will allow us to provide scores for gridded forecasts in addition to our station-based type forecasts. It will enable ASWSB and STI to plan and evaluate improvements to digital aviation services. And there's your usual reasons why you would do verification. You can identify areas that need improvement and address those, and then see if the changes that you made actually benefited anything. Next portion of this talk will kind of get into how you can use AFVT to do verification. Basically, users are going to access the AFVT through a web-based GUI. A user would select what they want to verify, where they would like to verify, and over what period, and they'll get the results right back in the browser. It's a near real-time tool. We're ingesting these forecasts and observations continuously, basically, so you would be able to verify what happened this morning, this afternoon, if you really wanted to. There are grid-to-point capabilities as well as grid-to-grid. The data that we ingest just kind of piles up. We right now have over 4 years of data. It starts in 2012, and as long as we're able to, we're just going to keep kind of adding on to the end of that. And anyone with NOAA credentials can log in and take a look at this tool. I'm going to actually step through in a couple of minutes and give you a demonstration of how to use the tool. So we welcome you to do that and give us some feedback. This is a table that shows us what AFVT can actually verify. At stations, there are about 10 elements that we include in our database, including elements of importance to aviation operations, such as ceiling height, visibility, and flight category. We have fewer analysis grids to do the gridded verification, but there's still a number of NDFD forecasts that we are able to verify in AFVT. For both the grid-to-point and grid-to-grid interfaces, we verify the top-of-the-hour NDFD issuances at every hour of the day, so 24 issuances per day. And since this is focused on aviation grids, we focus on the first 36 hours on near-term verification. We also include gridded LAMP and gridded MOS guidance to compare with the NDFD so that you can get an idea of how forecasters are improving on available guidance. I explained that you can, a user chooses what to verify. They also choose where to verify. There are many scales available in AFVT. You can get national statistics, regional statistics. You can get statistics in a WFO or even at a particular station or group of stations. Likewise, there are great flexibilities in how to break down the time scale of what you verify. We have data going back to 2012, and it's near real time, so you can look at annual scores or hourly scores. It's highly customizable, which is a really powerful thing. So next, I'd like to discuss how one actually uses the Aviation Forecast Verification Tool. Like I said, anyone with NOAA LDAP credentials can log in and use this tool. You could do it right now in another window if you're on the call remotely. The address is right here, and you'll just use your LDAP credentials, so your first out, last name, and your email password. So here is the start page for AFVT. Since the backend is composed of two databases, we have two separate pages. So the first choice you have to make is whether you want to do station-based verification or gridded verification. The selections that you make for each are fairly similar, so I'm going to walk us through the grid-to-point side, but like I said, both sides are very similar, so it would be the same approach. So you click through and you land on the grid-to-point interface. And like I said before, there's three basic steps. You end up choosing what you want to verify, when you want to verify, and where you'd like to verify. So the first step would be to choose which element you want to look at, the weather element. Here we've chosen ceiling height. It's a drop-down menu, and anything that's available will show up there for you. An option here that is available is to have customizable element thresholds. By default, we have, for some elements, we have default categories defined. For example, for flight category, there are certain kind of standardized categories that we have available. If your office doesn't use those default categories, or you're interested in some specific range, you can actually check that checkbox and define your custom thresholds and submit a query based on what you want to see. So that's something that is a nice feature of AFVT that's not necessarily available in other verification systems. After you've chosen what you want to verify, and if you want to customize thresholds, you can also make a choice about what verification technique you'd like to use. by default, we use the top of the hour observation. But you can picture in aviation operations, not everything happens at the top of the hour. Your low ceilings aren't necessarily going to happen at noon. Maybe they happen at 12:15 or 12:20. If you select this highest impact observation, what AFVT can do is it'll look over the specials in the hour, figure out, the appropriate value, for example, for ceiling height, the lowest value over the hour, and then use that as the observation to verify the forecast. So that's a newer feature that some people who may have already seen AFVT, that's a newer feature that we've implemented recently. And so the next step then is to figure out when you would like to verify. The first thing that you choose is your base forecast, what you want to compare any other data sources to. By default, we're going to be looking at what forecasters put out, so you would choose NDFD, but you could choose to put GMOS or GLAMP in that drop-down if that's the thing that you really want to look at. You would choose what issuances you want to look at. You can choose multiple issuances. They don't even have to be contiguous, so you could look at 0Z and 3Z if you wanted to do that. You can choose to include guidance in the verification. Whatever guidance is available will show up here. So for example, we're looking at, what are we looking at? Ceiling height. So there's no gridded MOS ceiling height, so that's not available in this table, but gridded LAMP is available. If you do choose to look at guidance, you need to choose what offset you want to look at. And the motivation behind that is you want to choose an offset so that you can look at the guidance that the forecaster would have used to prepare their forecast, so that you can see how a forecaster improved over the guidance. And then there are a few more selections. You can look at multiple forecast projections. You can choose whether you want to look at forecasts based on when they were issued, or whether you want to verify based on when forecasts were valid. And then you would choose your date range accordingly down here. Like I said before, we have data back to 2012. The point queries come back fairly quickly. And the gridded verification, if you choose a larger date range, you might be waiting a little bit longer just because there's so many grid points. All right, so at this point, you have chosen what you'd like to verify and when you'd like to verify. So the next step is to choose where you would want to verify. These different tabs are just different options for areas and locations. You can do all stations in a region, all stations in a WFO, or multiple WFOs in regions. Or what you can also do is you can choose the station tab, and you can choose individual stations, whatever you'd like. We do have a couple of predefined station lists defined in this drop-down menu, so that you don't necessarily have to think of all of the stations that you'd want to use. This map underneath here is, zoomable, and you can pan it, so you can drill down to wherever your area of interest really is. The final option here in the AFVT is this output format. It's an optional section that lets you break down the scores in different groupings. So, for example, if you were looking at a year of data, but you wanted to know what the scores were in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, you could choose to break down the stats by quarter, and then the scores would be broken out that way when you click Get Report. But you could do that, based on valid time or forecast location, so that you get the scores for, say, BWI and National Airport separately or together, if those were the two stations that you were looking at. So finally, once you've manipulated all these bells and whistles, you click Get Report, and ta-da, you would get your verification results. They're available as either text format or as graphics, and we have the ability to save off the scores into a CSV file if you'd like to manipulate it on your own with any spreadsheet software or scripts or anything like that. You can also save it off as an image to refer to later, so you don't have to go through all of those queries again to bring up the results. So that's a quick run through of the grid to point interface. So grid to grid interface, you can see, looks remarkably similar. You would make your same selections, what you'd like to verify, when and where. We have, I'm going to skip through there real quick. We have a couple of different selections of sectors or breakdowns of how you can view the information. You can look at the entire domain. You can look at just a region. We have these ARTSI boundaries, or you can choose a WFO. You would choose a different breakdown like this. A smaller area is going to return a query faster from the database. So if you're not particularly interested in looking at the whole CONUS, maybe you just want to focus on your WFO, you could choose just to return your WFO and take a look at it that way. This is an example of results from the grid-to-grid interface for a WFO query. This is an example actually from the 2015 Aviation Weather Testbed Summer Experiment. One of the things we were doing at that meeting was working on experimental AWC 5-kilometer grids for ceiling and visibility. We were able to ingest those in real time into AFBT, and in the afternoon breakout session, take a look at how it did. So what we have here is the NDFD for Charleston, West Virginia, compared to this experimental 5-kilometer AWC product that we were issuing at the testbed. In this corner is the RTMA visibility grid, and here we have the operational gridded lamp. And so the thing that will probably stand out to mostly everybody is you can see the edit areas in the Charleston grid pretty clearly. They carve out their valleys and ridges and use that to populate their grids. It highlights being able to look at all of these the grid guidance and the forecast and the analysis all together. It lets, in this example, lets you see the need for Charleston to have better guidance. You can see that, the AWC and the GLAB products are just sort of big blobs instead of this fine detail that's in the NDFD. You'll note sometimes that their neighbors here are blank, and that's because, at least at the time, the neighboring offices were not issuing this grid. So sometimes they'll be missing data for that reason as different offices come online with their digital aviation grids.
So Tabitha, can you walk us through the NDFD? What are we seeing with the reds and blues and the valleys and visibility? So is that good verification, bad verification? Right.
So this is actually just the raw forecast. So the verification would be just comparing it side by side with like the RTMA,
okay,
which is the analysis. So yeah, this is visibility. So the reds are low visibility, the greens are higher visibility. You can
so in the valleys there's fog, or
right?
Okay.
Right. Yeah, this was August 2015. So yeah, fog in the valleys, clear on the ridges, and they have carved out edit areas in GFE that let them do this kind of detail work that isn't really present in the guidance, and even the RTMA isn't really picking up that level of detail. So there's room for improvements all around, sort of what our conclusion was from that. So some of our future plans include working on enhancements. We would like to improve the visualizations, particularly in the grid-to-grid interface. We're working on methods to bring back monthly grid point by grid point statistics and have some interactive charts that will let you visualize verification results a little better in the grid-to-grid side particularly. We are working on adding some additional weather elements to AFBT, including things like the NDFD weather grid. Very soon, we will be expanding to the OCONUS, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. And since yesterday, there was a successful implementation of the National Blend of Models version 2. We're going to be working on bringing that into AFBT as an additional guidance source to compare the NDFD to. And our ultimate goal is to transition this tool into NWS operations in IDP. So from here, we love feedback. We would love for you to log in and try out the tool and let us know, what you like, what you don't like, what you think could use improvement, or if you just have questions about what does this button do, we're happy to answer that. If you have recommendations for future development, send them our way. We really just want to make sure that this tool provides the key capabilities needed to support aviation forecasting that provides the right verifications that you need. So you can provide feedback either through our VLab community. We do have a mailing list as well. They have not been heavily trafficked to date, so I'm hoping that this VLab forum is a great opportunity to find users that might be interested in using our VLab community. But you can also just contact me directly for more information. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And so speaking of answering any questions that you have, that's actually the end of my slides. Kind of blew through them a little quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Tabitha. So we are moving into our question and answer part of the forum. So if you have a question, a reminder, please raise your hand in the GoToWebinar, and John Chattel will unmute you, or use the chat feature. John, do we have?
We do have a question. Ronald Union has asked, would you be open to adding major TRACONs or fixes?
To
TRACON.
Okay.
I assume a TRACON is a aviation region?
Yeah, that's around the airport.
I think if we can get shapefiles for something like that, it's probably doable because it's just a matter of selecting which grid points come out of the database. So if there are shapefiles available for that, we would probably be able to look at adding a feature like that.
And fixes was the other thing?
Yeah, or fixes.
Could you ask?
Yeah, can you clarify what that means?
The aviation jargon of a fix. Robert, is it?
Ronald.
Ronald.
Oh, I'm sorry, Roland.
Roland, if you could clarify what you mean by that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't. Unmute him.
Okay, hang on, Ron. We're going to try to unmute you. And others, please queue up your questions by raising your hand. John will be getting to you in a moment.
Roland is unmuted.
Roland, go ahead. Are you there? Do you have a microphone?
Perhaps not.
Okay.
Oh, he said mic isn't working.
Mic isn't working. All right. So you can send a follow-up in a subsequent chat, but I think you heard the answer from Tabitha. Yeah, following along those lines, I think, believe it was GSD. So there's the idea of using more aviation relevant kind of verification along flight paths and choke points and those. And I, again, not familiar with the jargon, but have you looked into some of that as well?
A little bit. We had a couple of technical interchange meetings with the group over at GSD. I think the tool you're thinking of might be Insight.
Insight.
I forget what all the letters in Insight stand for. They're working on their tool, and yes, it does that kind of work. But whether we did not end up deciding to say unify those types of things or anything, their work's a little different from what we're doing.
For the record, Jeff Walter-Stryker mentions that fixes are critical aviation navigation points. Something traffic routing, not traffic routing.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so I guess similar to the answer that I gave Roland, yeah, if we can definitely explore if it's something that's sort of a geographic, polygon. If we get a shapefile for something like that, we could compute statistics within that polygon and return those, similar to how we added the RC boundaries recently.
Okay. So I'll jump in here. I have one more question. So it seems like a potential useful feature for this is some sort of ability for users to define thresholds when, say, for example, a forecast was a bust, particularly bad, and that if the tool could notify them of that, you wanted to know when your ceiling forecast was just terrible at this location, and then it would notify them when those conditions were met. Is that possible, feasible? And
I mean, that's not really how the tool is structured. I mean, all of this information is in the database, so the kind of data mining possibilities are endless. But we don't have any feature right now to automate notifying users of forecast busts or interesting things that happen. It's really incumbent on the user to come in and make their query and then see what the interesting results are. That's not something that we've looked at now.
Okay. Other questions, John? Any?
Yes. Let's see. Stephen Zubrick, who I've unmuted, says we do DAS, but don't think our grids are ingested into NDFD. How do we find out if our DAS grids are in the NDFD?
Dave, do you remember?
Yeah, well, they get into NDFD, they have to be included on the service backup or IFPS list of elements. So there's a file in AWIPS that tells you which elements get backed up to the IFPS server in Silver Spring. And if they go to that server, then they will be included. I can send you the file name if you want.
Steve, you're muted.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Dave. So they're not really available through the NDFD websites right now, you know, the National Weather Service public site.
No, we don't. No ceiling or visibility grids are being made available outside the Weather Service. That has, you know, that's intentional. So they'll decide when they'll be made available experimentally, and that has to go through the whole process. So all this stuff, the verification site, and the way to look at them internally, you have to go to a page like this, which is a know a password, no user count and password.
So it looked like on a couple of the slides that she showed, you know, it looked like there may have been data for our part of our CWA. So it almost looks like they are going in on like slide 23.
We're downloading GRIB2 files from an internal server, I think. We got them from Tim Boyer, who works on NDFD. So we're not scraping them from any of the public sites as far as I know. So that might be why we have,
But if you look at slide 23, you can clearly see that it looks like Blacksburg CWA does not have any digital grids in there for visibility, but maybe we do, just because you know, we actually have colors for part of our CWA for the boundary,
right,
just east of Charlie West.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like my answer is yes, they are going in there, and we'll use this tool.
If I remember correctly, Steve, I think that your visibility grids are there, but your ceilings aren't, something like that.
Ah, okay. So, yeah, I guess, you know, we'll need to get the name of that file at some point, or you can tell me now, or whatever you want to do.
I'll send you an email.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Yes, we have one from Eric Lenning. We unmute him to see if he wants to add something. He says, are there job sheets with step-by-step instructions for generating various results?
So one thing that I probably should have highlighted in these slides that I didn't is you can see on the top navigation bar, there's a couple of pull-down menus. One is called Guides. Underneath there's user documentation that lets you know all of the assumptions that go into the tool and stuff like that. But one of the links is a user tutorial. So you can click through. I mean, this is just a PDF, so we don't have it up right now. But if you go to the site, you can click that drop-down menu, and there's a user tutorial there that should guide you through the process of generating results.
Eric, did you want to add anything else? You're unmuted.
I see that there's a quick start, an FAQ, new features, and documentation.
Yeah, quick start would be the one that would give you an idea of what buttons to press, basically.
It looks like quick start is very similar to the presentation that you're giving today.
That is true.
Okay.
It is. It's pretty similar.
I just didn't see, you know, like an example to say you want to plot this result for this time period, you know, just, you know, job sheets that address various scenarios.
We can put something together like that. Like if you have a more specific request of what you would want to put on that job sheet, just shoot me an email and we can work together. Well, we'll do most of the work, but we can put something like that together because that might be more useful than this sort of walkthrough. It's a good suggestion.
We've been kind of experimenting with it here during the call, and I get this infinite loop of blue circles here, so I'm not sure if I'm doing it correctly or if there's, something wrong on the other end.
Okay, we'll take a look and see. It is a prototype tool, so sometimes it might be a little broken, but I don't anticipate that there should be very many issues today.
Yeah, Erica, infinite loop of blue circles is a feature.
Well, we did add.
That's good.
I'm just kidding.
We added the thinking circles because for a while you would just get a blank screen and you weren't sure if it was thinking or not. So
it's very fascinating.
We'll work on it.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions, John?
Yes, Andrew Kimball would like to know, can I compare output from the AFVT directly with Stats on Demand? And also, does the AFVT compute stats the same way as Stats on Demand?
So Stats on Demand doesn't verify gridded forecasts the way AFVT does. So you would be comparing kind of different products. You could submit similar queries, I believe, to Stats on Demand as AFVT and then compare that output, sure. What was the second part of that?
Let's see. He wanted to know if can I compare outputs directly, and then are they computed the same?
Right. So not quite directly. You'd have to basically have two browser windows open. Why can't I keep that in my head? I think
he's unmuted.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
So maybe he can add to.
Oh, and are they computed the same way? I'm sorry that I kept blanking on that.
Right.
It's a lot of standard verification metrics, so I would expect that they are generally verified the same way. AFVT does have a few options like this highest impact observation that would give you different results than Stats on Demand, but you would get different results because you have different inputs, but the scores should be computed, using standard metrics.
And isn't the verification on Stats on Demand is for the whole period through the hour, whereas we're looking at the hourly grids. So that's
right.
So it's going to be different.
Right.
Yeah, Stats on Demand does a verification every 5 minutes during the hours.
Okay.
That's for 1 hour a day to get 12 verifications.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, we do have one other one. This is from Ben Zhao, I believe is his name, and he says, this is a pretty interesting tool. Is it possible to have other models like HRRR and RAP also be verified?
So one thing that we've been tasked with to look at this year is to use the difference between using the RTMA, which is the analysis we're using, versus the IRMA, which is supposed to be the analysis of record. A drawback of using something like the IRMA is that it's not a real-time analysis that comes out maybe 6 hours later. We could explore using other analyses in the tool, but since the RTMA IRMA system is designed to be our analysis of record, that's what we've been relying on as our gridded truth.
But in terms of forecasts, what was the question directed towards, like verifying the HER? And
so in terms of other forecasts, we could include this. We haven't been tasked to look at that directly right now, but we could definitely ingest other forecasts. For example, like we're adding the National Blend of Models here soon. When AWC has had test beds, they've been able to route their prototype grids to us, and we've been able to display them. So if there's a requirement to add some other forecast sources, we can definitely look at adding those into the tool.
Very good. Other questions?
I think there are none from the online community.
In the room. Questions? In terms of the basics of your path to operation, so this is, you mentioned the IDP is the ultimate hosting of this?
We sure hope so.
Okay, and but there's no date set yet for that?
No. As you probably know, IDP has limited resources right now for onboarding. So, the projects in the queue are being prioritized, and I don't believe this has, received the higher prioritization that's needed to begin the onboarding. So we may still be a couple of years away from actually getting this into operation. Okay,
so it remains in an experimental sort of
a prototype experimental stance. Yeah.
Okay, great. Very good. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another one from Vincent Zhao. He asked, sealing in RTMA is still not available. What is the truth data for sealing in grid-to-grid verification?
Let me flip back for a second. We are not currently doing gridded verification of sealing since we don't have an RTMA analysis grid for it. That's on slide 6. We have a limited sample of elements that are able to do the grid-to-grid verification based on what's available in the RTMA. There we go. Yep. So we do have visibility, but we do not have sealing at this time.
Okay.
I have just one quick question. So are you using the virtual lab in any way to facilitate your development?
Yeah, so we're using the virtual lab development services side. So it's called development services. The Redmine site, and it hosts our Git repository. So we do our version control there. We do some issue tracking there to help do our project management for the site. We do have a VLab community set up on the collaboration services side, but we actually haven't made much use of it yet. We'd probably like to do more as we do this outreach and get feedback from users. So I would say we're heavy users of the development services side, but light users of the collaboration services side. Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, going once, going twice, sold. Well, thank you, Tabitha, for a very informative, clear presentation, and I encourage everyone to contact Tabitha offline if you have further questions for her or recommendations or suggestions. And otherwise, get in there. You saw the URL. It's in the slides, which are already on the VLab Forum website, so you can share it with your friends within Weather Service anyway, and have them go in there and try it out. Take it for a spin, try to kick the tires, whatever, and we will probably schedule a follow-up, in some time to see where it's at, and hopefully get more feedback from users on that. So thanks, everyone, and as I said at the outset, this recording will be uploaded shortly to the site, and you can point your colleagues to that if you would like to share the recording of this session. Reminder for the holidays, we will not be having a VLab Forum session in December, but back in January, yours truly will be giving you an update on the VLab itself. And then in February, we have a talk by Bill Rash on the Weather Archive and Visualization Environment, otherwise known as WAVE, which has a VLab community. If you're interested in checking that out early, you can go to the VLab and find Bill's WAVE community and see what's there to get a heads up. Thanks, everyone, and have a happy Thanksgiving. Signing off.